Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going back in time, back to the 16th century, to a place called the Duchy of Lorraine. Imagine a world where just a small argument, like something like borrowed bricks, could actually lead to someone being accused of witchcraft
Mm.
and then having to go through like a terrifying trial. That was just normal life for people in this area, which was right between France and Germany.
It's wild, isn't it? I mean, this whole era was just full of these witch trials. Lorraine actually had a ton of them, way more than you'd expect. Over like 50 years, historians think something like 3,000 people were executed.
3,000 people. Wow. That's a really scary number. And it makes you think about how afraid people must have been back then. Like, what were they so scared of?
Exactly. And to understand a little better, we're going to look closer at two trials. One from 1598, a woman named Francoise Cumin, and then another one a little later in 1604, a man named Nicholas Remy.
So two different people accused of witchcraft. Okay. What do we know about them? What happened?
Well, the cool thing is we have all these old documents from the trials themselves, thanks to a historian named Robin Briggs. This guy spent years and years going through thousands of pages of this stuff.
Wow, real detective work.
Yeah.
So like actual handwritten stuff from back then, not just someone's interpretation, but the real deal.
The real deal. It's not just like legal stuff either. It's people talking, their accusations, what they saw, even little details about their daily lives.
So it's like we can actually hear these people talking. It's almost like time travel.
It really is. And you can almost feel how tense and afraid everyone was. Reminds you that history is about real people, not just dates in a book.
All right, so let's start with Francoise Cumin. She was the wife of a blacksmith, 50 years old, and a refugee. She had to leave her home, and then she ends up being accused of witchcraft in this new place. Makes you think about how hard it was to be an outsider back then.
Yeah, being a refugee was tough. They didn't have anyone to stick up for them, no friends, no family in this new community, so it's not surprising that they were often blamed when things went wrong.
Like Francoise, she just becomes this easy target.
Exactly.
And when you read what people were accusing her of, it's pretty wild. I mean, they blamed her for everything. Animals dying, people getting sick, even when the crops didn't grow right.
Yeah.
It's like they truly believed that she was behind it all. Like nothing bad just happened naturally.
Yeah, it's like they thought everything had a reason, a cause. And usually for them, that cause was someone with bad intentions, using some kind of magic to hurt others.
So like instead of thinking about germs or natural disasters, they thought it was a witch's curse.
Exactly. It was their way of understanding why bad things happen.
And I guess for people like Francoise and her husband, they were just easy targets. I mean, they weren't rich or powerful, right?
Right. They were at the bottom, no one to protect them. So when something bad happened, guess who gets blamed?
The outsider, the one who's different.
Ugh.
So sad, right? How easy it was for people to have their lives turned upside down.
Mm.
And what's really interesting is that these accusations didn't just come out of nowhere. They often came from real disagreements, like everyday stuff that just blew up.
Yeah, you can see that in the documents, people arguing about property, money, even things like church taxes. Any little thing could become an excuse to accuse someone of witchcraft, especially if they already thought that person was capable of it.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
If you think your neighbor's a witch and then something bad happens to you, well, it's got to be their fault, isn't it?
Right. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And what about Francoise's husband? Didn't he try to defend her?
He did, but he may have actually made things worse. You see, he was known for getting angry and saying things like, "You'll regret this," or "just wait and see," stuff like that.
Oh, no, I see. Trying to stick up for his wives, but in that time and place, it just sounds like he's threatening people with curses.
Exactly. Just normal anger, but people twist it to fit their belief.
So even trying to defend yourself could be used against you. It's a no-win situation.
It really was. And sadly for Francoise, it didn't stop there. She was taken to the authorities, and at first she was really strong, denied everything, but then she was tortured.
Torture? Oh my gosh. That's horrible. It just makes you realize how brutal things were back then.
Yeah. Torture was pretty common in these witch trials. They actually thought it was necessary to get the truth out of people.
But we know now that torture doesn't work that way. People will say anything to stop the pain.
Exactly. So even if someone confesses under torture, it doesn't mean they're actually guilty.
It makes the whole system seem so unfair.
It definitely was. And after being tortured 2 different times, Francoise finally confessed. She later said they forced her, but by then it was too late. She was condemned.
It's like the system was designed to break people, to make them admit to anything, even if it wasn't true.
Yeah, it is. And the crazy thing is, even after saying she was forced, Francoise kind of accepted what was happening.
Why would she do that?
We don't know for sure. Maybe she just gave up hope. Maybe she thought that confessing would give her some peace. Or maybe she thought it was the only way God would forgive her. Wow. It's just so sad. She went through so much. Her story is a reminder that even in the darkest times, people can be incredibly strong. But it also shows us how dangerous fear and prejudice can be.
It definitely does. So we've talked about Francoise. Now let's look at Nicolas Remy. His case is interesting because it shows that it wasn't just women who were accused of witchcraft. Almost a third of the people accused in Lorraine were men.
Really? Wow. I always thought it was mostly women who were targeted in these witch hunts. So what happened to Nicholas? How did he end up being accused?
Well, Nicholas was a herdsman. He took care of animals, and like a lot of herdsmen back then, he knew a lot about healing animals, using herbs and stuff like that.
So he was like an animal doctor, kind of.
Right. But in a world where people believed in magic, that kind of knowledge could be seen as suspicious.
Like people might think, how does he know so much? Is he using magic?
Exactly. And just like with Francoise, the accusations against Nicholas started because of personal conflicts. People he'd had disagreements with started saying he was using witchcraft against them. So the same pattern. Everyday arguments turning into accusations of something much darker.
Right. It happened all the time.
So it's kind of like instead of being respected for his skills, Nicholas's knowledge actually made him a target. Makes you wonder, like, what was it about healers that made people so suspicious?
Yeah, it's really strange, isn't it? And the things people used as proof of his witchcraft were just bizarre. Like during the trial, Nicholas couldn't cry. And they saw that as proof that he was guilty.
Wait, what? Not being able to cry?
Yeah, there was this belief back then that witches couldn't cry. Like their connection to the devil had dried up all their emotions. Crazy, right?
It is crazy. Like, something as simple as not crying could be twisted into evidence. Just shows how powerful these beliefs were.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, just like Francois, Nicholas was also tortured to try and get him to confess. They even used some really brutal methods on him, like thumb screws, the rack, and something called the strappado, where they hang you up by your wrists with weights tied to your feet.
Oh my God, it's just awful to think about what these people went through.
Yeah. It's a reminder that even though we've come a long way, cruelty and injustice can still happen anywhere.
So did Nicholas confess after all that?
He did. After being tortured for so long, he finally admitted to being a witch. And his confessions were really detailed. He talked about going to witches' sabbaths, making deals with the devil, and doing harmful magic.
Witches' sabbaths. It's like something out of a fairy tale.
It does sound like that, doesn't it? It's hard to know if he really believed these things or if he was just saying what they wanted to hear.
Yeah, I mean, after being tortured, who knows what you'd say?
Right. Some historians think maybe people started to believe their own confessions after a while, like the pressure and the torture just made them lose touch with reality. Others think they were just making stuff up based on stories they'd heard about witches.
So was he actually a storyteller trying to save himself?
It's possible, but in the end, it didn't matter whether Nicholas truly believed it or not. He was still condemned based on a confession that was forced out of him.
So what happened to him?
He was sentenced to death, like most people accused of witchcraft in Lorraine. They actually strangled him first and then burned his body.
I guess they thought that was a kinder way to execute someone.
Yeah, merciful is a weird word to use, but I think they saw it as a slightly less horrible way to die.
It's still pretty terrible. But what happened next is even stranger. Right before they executed him, Nicholas and the judges forgave each other.
I know, it's hard to understand. Like, how can you forgive someone who's put you through so much pain? But maybe they both saw it as a way to find some kind of peace.
It's a very strange thing to think about.
It is. It really shows you how complex human beliefs can be, even in the face of something as awful as a witch trial.
Well, the whole thing is really fascinating and a bit disturbing, to be honest. It definitely makes you think.
It does. These trials show us what can happen when fear and superstition take over. And even though they happened centuries ago, the themes are still relevant today. The danger of blindly believing things, the urge to blame others for our problems, and how easily justice can be manipulated.
Definitely some food for thought there. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of witchcraft, be sure to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more explorations of history, science, and culture. We'll see you next time.